Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back. It's another episode of the Koala Podcast. And in this episode, I'm talking to Rose and she's the founder of the Enlightened Life Temple in Colorado. She's been involved in the process of regulated psilocybin, and I'll ask in a second about other compounds as well, with regard to, I presume, religious practices and medicine in Colorado since 2021. I saw her on LinkedIn. She was talking about all the charlatans popping up left, right, and center. And it's a conversation I've had a couple of times with a couple of people already this year. And it's just, I'm seeing more and more of it. So I got in touch with Rose and said, look, would you mind having a chat with us about that? And also, the work that she's done and how she sees Oregon and Colorado working its way through these issues. But for me here at the Koala, it seems to me that the charlatans are just they're everywhere, and there's as always, when lots of money turns up in these things, you get more and more dodgy geezers, as we say in England. So thank you, Rose, for being on the show. Let's talk about how you got involved in this to start with.
Wow, that's a long story. Yeah. In the days before psychedelics were banned, when everybody was involved in the psychedelic revolution, and they were still legal, that's when I first experienced psychedelics. And it was a cultural...
So you're talking, what, 63, 64, 65?
Probably for me, it would be late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah.
Right before the ban. And there was, a lot of leaders in the field that were talking about it. And there was a whole generation of people who were exploring and experiencing psychedelics. And it was really shifting the collective consciousness a lot. So I started out exploring psychedelics back then. And I was very interested in the studies that were going on about how beneficial it could be for psychotherapy for addiction and things like that. So I had in my young mind that I would become a counselor and I would be able to use psychedelics with people. And then before I got to college, they were banned. So that's when I really got my start. And I, because we were a community of people exploring these things, I learned quite a bit about helping people through intense experiences and, helping people navigate difficult trips and things like that. So it's something that I continue to be very
during that period. I grew up in the 1980s. I took psychedelics. So immediately I ran and read my Kesey and I read my Tom Wolfe and I read whatever I could find. I always get a sense from that period that people were really good about self-policing themselves, and even the people who produced and distributed the compounds were mainly, and not always, but there was this sense of there was some sort of morality about the way it was done. Did you feel that at the time? And did you feel that changed as soon as they banned it?
I do. I feel like there was a sense of a collective awakening going on, and a sense of how empowering these substances could be. And there was, taking care of each other in a community context that was going on.
And do you think this really interests me, because at that time, it was young people, artists, writers, but nobody from the power structures within American society. But now, it's all the power structure people in business and technology who are are all excited about it and have used these compounds, but they're not using them in the same way as your generation used them. And I think this is a real issue in, the mid 2020s compared to the late 1960s, early 1970s. There seems to be a real disconnect between those two periods of explosions of understanding of psychedelics.
Yeah, exactly. There were academic institutions that were studying them, and there was the project going on at Harvard that
Yeah.
Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert were involved in. And then there was a bit of scandal around even then in the academic arena because the medicine is so awakening that it really blows beyond the limitations of the clinical psychology point of view. And so we were all encompassing that. I mean, look what happened to Richard Alpert. He was, an LSD psychedelic advocate, and then he got to a certain point of conscious awakening, and he went to India and actually became, got involved in a lineage and started meditation. So that whole aspect of our culture, that's so much a part of our culture now, the meditation, the yoga, the Eastern practices, all of that came about because of the psychedelic awakening. And so that still keeps, the medicine itself in a very specific category of what is it capable of, what are its potentials. And then when it got banned, of course, it became underground, and then we come more to your generation's exploration, and we had raves going on and underground.
That's exactly right. I mean, for us I'm UK based, so we started in the early 80s, and that was and it was entirely beyond underground until it had that 1988-89 explosion because of MDMA, but all those other mushrooms were there, and LSD.
The use of mushrooms and mescaline and other psychedelic compounds continued. It just continued underground, and there became a whole tradition of underground guides. But we did lose a lot of that community sense of safety within a community of people who understood the medicine, and a sense of a collective experience. And it became more of subgroups and individuals who were kind of on their own.
I think that's how we operated in the 80s, in the late 70s and 80s, and it really was.
So I do think some of the communities where the MDMA raves happened had that more of a bit of a collective and group experience as well. But when we come back around to starting to allow research again, and the research wasn't even the same as it had been. The research really started in the 30s and 40s and 50s, went all the way through the 60s and 70s before they stopped allowing people to research with it. And I find it humorous, that now they say, oh, we need more studies when we've had 60 years of studies. So,
it's the same with cannabis. It's like we need more studies. I think you'll find there's enough out there. And most of them are copies of other studies as well. I mean, but that's always the way to try and kick the can down the road, isn't it? The old "we need more studies" line.
Right. It's a delay tactic, really. Do we really want people to have a conscious awakening? Is that going to serve the status quo?
We only want them to have a conscious awakening if they spend money, I think is what it seems like to me at the moment.
So so then they're looking at it through that lens now. How do we monetize this experience? But also, what I've observed from the legalization efforts that have happened and the systems that have been set up for legal access, they have not only monetized it, they have medicalized it to the extent that you don't realize the potential of the medicine. You believe, and they put out that this is part of your therapy, and it's strictly for therapeutic purposes, for healing your PTSD or healing your anxiety or healing your addiction. And therefore you have to continue the therapy, and you have the medicine.
And it's presented as though it's a single channel where anybody who's used psychedelics knows that it does that. It goes out and wide, and you don't really know what's going to come, do you?
Yeah, these psychedelic compounds have such great potential. We used to say they blow your mind. They expand your consciousness, and because your consciousness expanded, that's why you heal from all these things. Now they want to frame it that it's a tool that we can use to help you heal from these things, but you're still going to need therapy. And of course, when people take psychedelics, they're highly suggestible. So if they're taking it in a therapy clinic, a medical setting, or something like that, they are going to say immediately, there's something wrong with me. And so therefore this medicine can help me, which really the medicine itself contains the potential for us to realize there's nothing wrong with me. And I can just forget about it. And I can expand my consciousness and become a greater identity. And therefore I'm liberated from anything that was bothering me.
That's really interesting in terms of, because Oregon and Colorado are trying really hard to do the right thing compared to everybody else in the US at the moment. But do you think it's not the right thing?
I think we should not be setting it up as an either or.
Yeah.
First of all, psilocybin mushrooms are consistently rated among all experts over decades and by statistics to be the safest substance in existence. The most dangerous harm-filled substance is alcohol, which is completely legal everywhere. So when you say that you have to create these legal systems for safety, it's kind of not really a true statement. Can people get in trouble when they're on psychedelics? Certainly they can. But in and of itself, there's ways to reduce the harm, the risk of harm. But the risk of harm is very small to start with. And so when you put it in a setting where you have to be in an office, you have to be with a licensed person, you have to limit the dosage, you start to introduce other factors that can increase the risk of harm rather than reducing the risk of harm. You know, for example, a person who's having a really intense experience and they need to move around and they want to get up and they're having a, really challenging trip, we would just take them outside and have them lay down
exactly.
on the earth.
What do you want to do? It's what do you want to do, basically? I mean, that's what it's meant to do, isn't it? Do you want to listen to some music? Do you want to go outside? Do you want to eat? Well, you probably don't want to eat something, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, you should have that freedom.
Yeah.
And you should be with a person who's a sober guide, who's someone who can be there and help you move around because your mobility is affected and you're intoxicated and help you be sure to hydrate.
Well, like you say, the communities and informal networks always in the past, people just knew that and just did it. They didn't even think about it. That's, if you had the experience, you know that that's what you have to do. If a friend says, I want to try to do this or that.
Yeah, I do think the training is valuable, having training if you want to sit with people, if you want to be a guide. It's very important to have knowledge about the medicine and how it works and what can happen and how to support whatever might happen. But when you build a system that has rules that say you can't leave the premises, you can't go outdoors.
That's somewhat insane, isn't it?
You're taking away proven harm reduction methods. Yeah. And, like now they're talking about in New Hampshire, was it New Hampshire? No, New Jersey. They just passed a research bill. They're not allowing public access like Colorado and Oregon, but they're going to conduct research, but it has to happen in a hospital with a doctor present.
That's the last place I'm going to be taking psychedelics, is the hospital.
Yeah, I mean, we have decades of studies and clinical research and evidence showing that the setting is very important and that certain settings can induce fear and cause negative manifestations in the experience. If you're in a hospital and somebody's monitoring your blood pressure and you're under the influence of a psychedelic, you're automatically going to think, what's wrong with me? Am I dying? And then that's going to lead to a whole other psychological scenario. So it's really not an appropriate setting at all.
So Western societies specifically, but all societies love to place a structure on this stuff because they don't understand it. is the best approach what some cities are doing, are just decriminalizing it and saying it's decriminalized and letting people, and obviously in that process, some people are going to have a bad, it's not going to work, and there's going to be involvement with the criminal justice system and other things. But generally, it's better than putting it within that little box and keeping people in that box and sending them a bit crazy.
The facts and the actual statistics, because when we have so many cities now and counties that are decriminalized, and we're not seeing a huge increase in crime connected to psilocybin, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, exactly.
So it doesn't happen like that. Psilocybin makes you very inward and reflective and contemplative, and you're very involved in what's happening. Most of the time, you don't feel like even moving around very much. So you're not going to be, I suppose there are those college age
Yeah,
people
of course. I
who,
mean, and that, you read the odd story of somebody sitting naked in their car, and a policeman finds. I mean, but it's not a criminal activity. They just might look a little odd to other people because they're in a certain state of mind. But that seems to be I follow these stories, and it's always the same sort of story. It's and anybody who's used psychedelics will know that those sorts of experiences happen, and you just have to be kind and gentle with that particular individual, and it's all over in half an hour.
yeah. Well, no, it's actually over in 6 to 8 hours
Yeah,
with
I know,
the
but in terms of
long lasting.
yeah,
But I do think harm reduction is very important when we have legal access or when we have decriminalized scenarios where people can get the education they need to understand why it's important to have a safe setting, why it's important to have intention and how to prepare for it, what to expect, how to navigate the things that might happen, why it's helpful to have a sober person with you, and how to integrate what you gain from the experience afterwards. I think all of that should be a part of social harm reduction that's available to people in decriminalized and legal settings, or even in settings where it's not legal. We still should have psychedelic harm reduction, which is something that I specialize in, which is why I look at these legal systems through the lens of harm reduction. And I see that they're introducing potential harm that didn't exist before the legal system.
well, this leads exactly into why I came to you on LinkedIn, which is, so how do we do this? Because other people are coming in and saying, you pay us lots of money and we'll manage this for you in a setting that is really designed around, as you say, monetization of psychedelics for personal use or individual use, or how whatever language we want to use, because it changes every 10 minutes.
In the Colorado,
How do we stop these people generating money from individuals, and how do we create systems where this works in a more social fabric?
well, currently in Colorado, those two systems coexist because Colorado's law says that you can access psilocybin through a licensed healing center with a licensed facilitator using regulated licensed products, or you can have it for your own personal use, or you can have it in a community setting. So, for example, my nonprofit temple, Enlightened Life, we offer ceremonial use, which relates to our spiritual traditions about expansion of consciousness and becoming that more transcendental self as a path to healing, but also as a path to spiritual awakening. And so we can offer ceremonies to people under that community use side of the Colorado law. So they coexist. In the legal system, you have to pay for the use of the healing center, you have to pay the facilitator, and you have to pay for the mushrooms. But in the community use side, you can pay for harm reduction support from a trained person who can help you stay safe. You can pay for a community gathering or to have the support of a community, a spiritual ceremony or something like that. But you cannot pay for the mushroom. The mushroom has to be shared in the community and personal use side. So there's no financial gain around the actual product. The only place you might pay for something would be for harm reduction support or a donation to the nonprofit that might be hosting a ceremony. So in the legal system, you're going to pay quite a bit more. They estimate it costs anywhere from 2,800 all the way up to 5,000 plus for a session in the legal system. And the product is crazy. You know, I have to say, as a person who's been around these substances for a long time, in the underground world, or in the black market, as they call it, you can buy quite a bit of mushroom for $300, right?
Or
But in
you
the
can,
legal,
or if you know where to go, which field to go to, you can get yourself a big shopping bag of
going
it for free.
exactly, you can go into natural areas and harvest it yourself, as long as you know how to recognize the right mushroom. But in the legal system, you're going to pay up to $450 for one dose.
It's a lot of money, isn't it? And of course, then that excludes 90% of the people who might
The
actually.
costs are a big factor in, and Oregon has some data they've been collecting since they launched their programs, and it shows that many people are not able to afford it, and they're not being able to access it, because in Oregon you can only access it through the legal system. So that's why it's good to have these coexisting tracks. You know, if you're working with a therapist and you have significant psychiatric issues, then you probably should stay in the legal system and work with your therapist in the legal system. But if you are just wanting to explore it, or you're tired of therapy, I can't tell you how many people contact me, and then we ask them in the screening, are you in therapy? And inevitably, many of them will say, I'm over therapy. I did it forever. It didn't help. I want to try something different, which is why they're coming to the medicine now, because of, the headlines and all of
Yeah,
that, which, people only read the headlines. They don't really understand
no,
what it really takes.
exactly.
They make it seem
Reading a collection of 20 books over a period of a couple of years before it's it's always just headlines. And look, this is again why I came to you on LinkedIn, because it's all about headlines. And what I'm seeing at the moment from a distance here in Asia, I'm looking at Southern California and Central America and all this ayahuasca shamanistic stuff, where wealthy people are going to very expensive retreats, whatever that means, and then being led by people who of dubious quality, seems to be most of the time. How do we,
yeah.
and then they come back and they've discovered the world, or they've discovered something. I don't know what it is they've discovered, but normally what they've discovered tends to be, because of the background they're from, tends to be some exploration about how to further monetize that, or whatever they're doing. And I think this is a really dangerous part of psychedelics at the moment, because it reminds me of, and I come to this in every conversation, it reminds me of what Huxley wrote about in the 1930s, 1940s, 50s, about imagining a 21st century world where people did this. And I'm now seeing it like literally like a newsreel running live in front of me, and it really worries me. How does somebody like you, who's been in the culture such a long time, think that, how do we, combat is the wrong word, but how do we engage or understand that before psychedelics are used in a way that we fear?
Well, psychedelics are already being used in the ways that we're concerned about. There are cults that form around certain celebrities and influencers who, are promoting, and not just promoting the psychedelic, but promoting themselves and their own take on it and what their belief systems are. public education is really, really critical. But it is very hard to stop people from following other people. That's kind of built into the human nature. Whoever gets the most social media, whoever gets the most videos, whoever gets the most followers, right? Those become the people that people believe in, and those are the people that typically do not have sufficient information education, ethical training, and it's a doorway into problems. And that doesn't just apply to the Western New Age culture. It also applies to the shamanistic traditions in Central and South America, where they do have legitimate, real, ancient tribal traditions, and we should be going to those people for those kinds of experiences. But they also have people who realize that there's money in it and they need money because they're in these marginalized countries. And the Western people are willing to go there and pay for it. So then you end up, with the similar distortions getting introduced because money runs the world. Not only the Western medical industrial complex wants to get a hold of these things and make all the money from it, but people who haven't had any money, who actually were connected to cultures that were immersed in these traditions, they want to make money on it as well. And, the mushroom grows everywhere, grows all over the world. And anybody can go and get it just by learning how to identify it. So the mushroom isn't charging anything for the experience. Where we get into trouble is, for some people, the psychedelic experience really over kind of blows up their ego, and they get
Well, I was
this
about to say, because we've all read about, that the culture that you come from, the late 60s, which is trying to talk about psychedelics being egoless. But I see in the 21st century, as you just said, that it's ego full, and it's getting more so by the year.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand with the statistics that we see about narcissism being on the rise ever since the onset of social media. Um, people are driven to enhance their sense of self and enhance their knowledge and appear to everyone as an influencer. The whole word influencer is a scary concept, like we should not be influenced. We
I know
should
there was
be.
somebody a few months ago suggested that I was an influencer. I said, I'm not an influencer, because I write about something doesn't mean you're an influencer. You just write about something and you share ideas, and then other people are meant to look at those ideas and either work out whether they agree or disagree with those ideas. But it seems these days that if you say something, that's what it is, and that's particularly dangerous in this topic. If somebody's writing about chocolate, it doesn't really matter so much. But when you were talking about this, it's a little bit more scary, isn't it?
The psychedelic experience is a serious experience. Even if it's fun and you're having a great time, it's a serious experience because it's altering your mind and it's changing your ability to disconnect from the rational mind and to enter more into the experiential mind and the expanded mind. So that's a serious undertaking with any substance. And when people are trying to influence others, there's a million examples out there of people cultivating followers because I took psychedelics, so therefore now I'm a psychedelic influencer.
Yeah,
And
I know something more than you.
That's right. I know more than you do, and I can help you have the right experience. We are educators. You're an educator. I'm an educator. We're not trying to influence people. We're trying to educate people so they can find their own way and find their own belief system in the mix of all this information that we live in this age. Influencers want to be exclusive holders of information that you really need. And so therefore you should follow me. And that goes beyond education. That actually is influence. And I think we've seen a lot of negative outcomes from that cult influence and people really being led into crazy scenarios. But I have to say, the first negative influence in psychedelics was the CIA experiments with LSD and other psychoactive substances. And they are the ones that had people jumping off of roofs and out of windows because of the way they were doing it. You know, a psychedelic isn't something you have to take frequently. And you don't need to mix 2 or 3 different psychedelics together. One is sufficient. Again, we need that public education. We need people to understand how to experience these amazing substances in a way that reduces harm and helps you have a good outcome.
Look, we don't have, unfortunately, we don't have long to go. I could speak for about 5 hours with you, I think. But how do you feel in 2026 in terms of progress of understanding this and working towards something that is safer for everybody as it becomes more available to a wider range of people? Because, as you said, social media, you know, however people access these compounds, more will be accessed. Are you feeling positive about the future, or are you a little wary of what you're seeing at the moment?
I think we're at a crossroads, and I think it's a very important crossroads. And we really have to figure out, from a cultural standpoint, what direction do we really want to go? Because these substances have been used by humans since the beginning of time to expand consciousness and to free ourselves, literally free ourselves from our problems by understanding who and what we really are from a conscious point of view. When we over medicalize it and we try to take this expansive medicine and constrict it to the narrow confines of a medical Western psychological mindset, we're missing the point of that medicine. Instead, of what we should be doing is letting the medicine expand those fields, expand the field of psychology to encompass these higher potentials and expand our idea of how and where they should be used and what their real potentials really are. I would like to see the medicine expanding the system instead of the system contracting, trying to contract the medicine, because I really believe that's a formula for disaster. And I really believe that these plant medicines are so highly conscious that they're not going to let those kinds of systems succeed. Now, when we talk about the medicalization, we're also looking at synthetic compounds that are produced in the lab where they're replicating a molecule, and all they're replicating is the psilocybin. And there are many other compounds in the naturally occurring mushroom that affect the quality and nature of the experience. So they're trying to keep it in the pharmaceutical medical model for the purpose of profit. And but there, we already have studies that have come out that show that the natural medicine, people rate the experience much more highly than just the isolated synthetic compound of psilocybin. So I think that as we move toward legalization, there's no way that we can do it without breaking free from the focus on keeping it in a container of endless therapy, endless treatments, and continuing to make money. You know, these mushrooms should be more in a spiritual context, more in a community-based setting, because the ceremony is important. The connection with other people is important. The access to nature is important. And that is the tradition of these medicines. So extracting that out into these overly medicalized, heavily regulated systems, I believe, is a wrong path that should be going down. And it's not necessarily the way to safety, because you need to look at the harm reduction, evidence-based research and facts about psychedelic harm reduction. And you need to look at those systems and see how those kinds of systems are increasing the risk of harm by not paying attention to that evidence. So I think we have a long way to go with educating both the legislatures, the rule makers, the people that are in charge of creating legal systems, as well as educating the public and decriminalizing. It's really critical that if we're going to make it legal for you to take a pharmaceutical version of a component of a mushroom, you should equally have the human right to access the mushroom as it grows on the earth and take the entire thing on your own without any legal barriers. I really am a believer in nature should have never been outlawed, and it has to make a comeback. We have to reconnect with the earth and the substances that grow in the earth. We don't need to continue to get everything from a lab that costs a lot of money.
Well, Rose, thank you very, very much for being on the Karma Koala podcast. Absolutely fantastic conversation. And you circled around perfectly there at the end. Obviously dovetails exactly with the way I think about things as well. But I'd love to speak to you again on this topic because it's really, really important, and there's not enough people talking about it at the moment. So thank you very much for being on the Karma Koala.
Thank you so much for having me with you, and thank you for the important work you're doing.
Thank you very much indeed, Rose.
Live and direct, live and I take no jive.
Legalize the So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, great, Barry, a reefer.